Hey guys! Welcome back to Sacred Vedic Astrology. My name is Samantha, and I feel so blessed and truly so lucky to be a professional Vedic sidereal astrologer. In this video, we're going to go into a really interesting and really informative chart analysis. We're going to look into Joan Baez's Vedic sidereal astrological chart. And I was really excited about this one. For some reason, she was in the ethers for me. And I was like, you know what? Why do I feel like Joan is going to have her birth time online? I just felt it in my soul. And so I looked it up, and we had AA level, which is the highest level of accuracy for birth data information, which personally, I don't do chart analysis unless I know that someone has AA level accuracy, because I want to go into in-depth analysis and I don't want to have these questions of, is it really in the sign? Is the D9 accurate? So I don't really do any chart analysis unless I know the birth time was either given through the birth certificate or someone had it in their autobiography. We want that level of accuracy to be very solid for actual chart analysis. So she had her birth data online, it was AA level, and I was like, this is beautiful, let's go. So we're going to go into Joan Baez's Vedic astrological chart, because not only was she this really powerful artist, powerful musician, powerful lyricist, she also had this really powerful activism aspect of her career, which I thought was going to be really interesting to analyze. Where do we see that? Because of course it's going to come up in the Vedic astrological chart, and that would be through a strength of Mars, actually. So Mars is going to connect to activism, Mars is going to connect to energy, Mars is going to connect to drive. It's also going to be connected to the ninth house, because ninth house is, our higher belief system, our morals, principles, our viewpoints, and she happens to have Mars in its own sign in the ninth house. There you go. So I thought it'd be really interesting to see not only that really powerful creativity in her chart, but also the activism and the power and the strength, right? Because if someone's going to have that much sort of energy and power and ambition in their lifetime, they're going to have a strong Mars, they're going to have something connected to the sun or Mars in their career, or it's going to be well placed. So we will get into all of that in-depth analysis, and this is probably one of my favorite videos I've ever done. I feel like I say that in all my videos, but every time I do a new chart analysis, I'm like, wait, this is my favorite video I've ever done. So I actually even learned a lot through this chart analysis myself, where I was like, okay, these things are all connecting. So one of my favorite videos that I've done, and whether you're a fan, whether you're not a fan of Joan, it's just really, really a powerful chart to use as a lesson in how we do true analysis in Vedic astrology. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up Joan's Vedic astrological charts on the next screen. We're going to get into it. Let's get into Vedic chart analysis. All right, guys, so here we have Joan's Vedic astrological charts, and we're going to go into in-depth analysis, which I'm really excited about. So this was one of those charts that I was really hoping that we had AA level accuracy for birth data. So just so you guys know, essentially, if you're an astrologer, you start looking through this database of information where people have certain levels of accuracy for their birth time information. So we can get C level, we can get B level, but the level of accuracy that we're going to look to, if we're actually going to do a celebrity in-depth chart analysis, is going to be AA, which would be the highest level of accuracy. So for Joan, we get that AA level of accuracy, which is so beautiful, because when we get that, we can go into even the Varga charts, right? We can go into the D9, we can go into the D10 and know that we have that exact time of accuracy. So it's really beautiful to see that as an astrologer. It's like an astrologer's dream come true. Essentially, I was like, woo, we got AA level, let's go. Okay, so let us start with a chart analysis of Joan Baez. Okay, so let us start with her Lagna or her ascendant. So let's go over here to Pisces in the first house. So see how we get Ketu right there on the ascendant? Of course we do. So Ketu is at 12 degrees, the ascendant is 8 degrees, right? So that's a pretty tight degree orb of conjunction. Something you'll find with planetary analysis is the closer that a planet is to another planet, the closer that an energy is to the ascendant, the more so that energy is felt, right? It's almost like, if we think about, we're like sitting in a room with someone, right? We feel their energy, we feel their vibe. The closer they are, the more we feel the energy, the more we feel the vibe, right? So if we think about like planetary energy or the nodal axis sitting on the ascendant, the closer it is in degree orb, that's more so like, oh my God, this person is like right next to me, right? It's like we really feel that energy of that planet or of the nodal axis, because Ketu and Rahu are not planets, right? You never want to think that they are, but I'm just using that for the sake of explanation. Okay, so Ketu is really close onto that ascendant. It's in Pisces, on the Lagna, on the ascendant. So Ketu in the first house, Rahu in the 7th house, in the Pisces Virgo axis point. So being a Pisces Lagna with Ketu right there is interesting, because I've done in-depth videos on the Ketu first house placement. You guys can go back and watch that. Essentially, Ketu, when it goes onto the ascendant, it gives this energy where someone is strange, they're kind of mystical, they have this otherworldliness about them, and it's really easy for them to access the psychic. It's easy for them to access the other worlds, because Ketu is not this world, it's the other realms. So you'll find a lot of artists, singers, musicians have Ketu in the first house, because to be an artist, to be a musician, you have to be able to access something that's sort of beyond this realm, right? I always tell people, like, I have this theory that artists are always some of the most like spiritually inclined people, because art is not of this world, right? It's something that's channeled from a different place. It's this channeled sort of energy. So a lot of artists will have Ketu on the ascendant because it's easy for them to access the spiritual. It's easy for them to access the other worlds, right? So Ketu in the first house gives someone this sort of ease and this ability to access moksha, access spirituality, access creativity, access that Ketu energy, right? And you'll find a lot of famous people have Ketu in the first house because that's the nodal axis, right? That's the karmic experience of the chart. And what is a more karmic experience than like heightened fame and heightened success? Right? That's a very karmic experience in itself. It's a karmic experience I wouldn't want. Well, I do not want that fame energy, but when people have the nodes tied up in the first 7th house axis, they have this karma to balance between themselves and the public, right? Because Ketu Rahu is that nodal axis point. So there's some karmic experience unraveling between their self and their identity and who they are in this lifetime. And then the 7th house is the public. It's other people, it's relationships, right? So there's this karmic energy unfolding, and what's a more karmic experience than heightened fame and heightened success, right? That's karmic by nature. So that's why you see a lot of celebrities with Ketu in the first house, best believe it. Okay. Now, Ketu is also this sense of someone having some like confusion around their identity as well too. Because Ketu is going to be this void like energy. It's confusing, it's elusive, it's not so clear, it's not so cut and dry, right? And then it's right there in the first house, which is the self. So interestingly enough, when I was doing research before this, I found that Joan Baez was essentially diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. So she said she would go into these different identities and different personalities because of like childhood trauma, right? So interestingly enough, it's interesting to make those like connections, right? Where Ketu in the first house gives this confusion around the self. It gives some identity issues, gives this feeling of someone not always being so, this is my identity. It can really shift. It can really change, right? Another example is Lana Del Rey. When she came out on the music scene, there was all these like articles. Who is she really? Guys, like it's so literal. Like Ketu in the first house, confusion around identity, confusion around self, who is this person, right? These were the articles that were coming out. Jim Morrison, they used to say that he would have this kind of shift a lot of times in his identity, where sometimes he would be like the coolest guy in the room, and then, the next second he's trying to set his girlfriend on fire in a closet, right? So that Ketu in the first house, Rahu 7th house access, is having a lot of these like weird, strange identity shifts going on. Okay, now Ketu in the first house also gives someone a more sort of shy, introspective, spiritual quality about themselves, right? And her whole career was, yes, about music, yes, amazing lyricism, yes, so much creativity, but also it was really about trying to kind of like raise consciousness, and she was trying to, have this music that was waking people up to these different issues going on in the world and society, and there was so much activism in her music. So that Ketu energy is also like, okay, her ascendant, her first house, is also very spiritual. It's very much this like spiritual moksha sort of energy as well too. You also find people with Ketu in the first house, they have this very sort of mysterious vibe about them, where you always want to know more about that person. There's this like elusive energy about it. Okay, so that's Ketu right there on the ascendant. It's also film, photography, television, and of course she was on film, photography, television as a musician, right? You'll find a lot of those with Ketu in the first house just happen to be like on film at some point. They have a lot of photos of them out there, right? Because that's Ketu. Okay, so the nodes are in that very karmic first 7th house axis. So I have found in personal practice and personal study that the nodes cause a lot of issues in the first 7th house axis, which I'm not saying that to scare anyone who happens to have the nodes in the first 7th, but I know many people with that axis. I have a lot of clients, I have a lot of friends with that first 7th house nodal axis, and it's just difficult. It's a difficult placement because someone is always trying to balance their karma with others and the public and relationships and connections, and it's a lot of energy to hold in houses that connect to the public versus someone's self and their identity, right? To get like all this karma unfolding between those two houses is pretty intense. It is an intense experience. Okay. So Rahu's in the 7th right now. This is where we get like those eerily accurate aspects of astrology that to this day, as a professional astrologer, I'm like, how is it so accurate? So Ketu's in the first house. She has identity issues. She's diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. She talks a lot about being kind of more shy in her personal life and struggling to connect with other people. Okay, Ketu in the first house, they always feel different. They feel withdrawn. They feel strange. They feel like they don't fully connect with the world around them. That's Ketu in the first house. Okay, film, photography, television. She's on film. She has all these, photos of her. Ketu in the first house. She has a kind of more strange sort of connection to fame and the public. Ketu in the first house, Rahu in the 7th. Now, Rahu's in the 7th house. Rahu in the 7th house gives a famous partner. It gives a partner who's on drugs. It gives a partner who's into alcohol. It gives a partner who is a little bit, their character can be a little questionable with Rahu in the 7th house, best believe it. So we get Rahu in Virgo in the 7th house, okay? And it's actually said that Rahu or Ketu do the best in Virgo. That's what my amazing second Vedic astrology teacher taught us. I find it to be true. So Rahu is now strong in Virgo. It's in the 7th house of relationships and partners. So, okay, did Joan Baez have a famous drug-using, scandalous partner? Yes, she did. Quite literally. Okay, so in the documentary about Joan Baez, which if you guys watched it, whether you watched it or you didn't watch it, this is just for us to study astrology. This isn't about the person themselves, right? This is just for us to learn and understand the beautiful system of astrology. But it was famous and notorious that Joan Baez had this relationship with Bob Dylan. Okay, so they have this relationship. They really inspire each other musically, creatively. Bob Dylan is hugely famous, right? Vastly successful. Everyone wants a piece of him. Oh my God, Bob Dylan's coming out on the scene. He's so famous. Okay. Now, that's Rahu, fame and success, in the 7th house of relationships. Now, as they're going through their relationship, she says that she starts getting uncomfortable with the fact that he's going this path of like drug use, substance use, he's partying, he's engaging in substances. Rahu is drugs, alcohol, okay, fame. Now we have a famous partner who starts using drugs and alcohol, and she starts getting uncomfortable with it. Yes, best believe it. And then Rahu is also this sort of like energy of deception. There can be overlaps, there can be cheating with Rahu in the 7th house. So then he actually leaves her for another woman, and it was like famous that he was not very faithful during that relationship because he's in the heightened point of his fame and he gets pulled away into the fame. That is literally Rahu in the 7th house. All of it. A famous partner, drugs, alcohol, fame. They go towards the fame. They go towards the drugs. They get involved in the cheating. That is Rahu in the 7th house. Literally. Okay. So that's Rahu in the 7th house. And the 7th house lord is actually in the 10th house. So the 7th house is Virgo, gets disposited by Mercury. We hop over, Mercury's in the 10th, it's next to Venus, it's next to the sun. Darakarka is Venus. Now we get a creative partner who connects to her career, okay? Now we get an artist who helps propel her career forward. What happened? She was with a famous artist, 7th house lord, Rahu fame, drugs, alcohol, illusions, leaves her for another woman. 7th house lord's in the 10th house, also helps her career because she creates one of her most iconic songs based on the relationship. You can't make this stuff up. And all of my Venus-Mars dramatics are coming out in this video where I do astrology almost as like this most dramatic fun thing. But 7th house lord is in the 10th house. So she meets a famous partner and it helps her career. 7th house lord in the 10th house, best believe it. Darakarka is Venus. She attracts someone who is an artist and helps her in her career. That's how literal Vedic astrology is. Okay. And eerily enough, she actually attracted that whole experience in her Rahu Dasha. So when she was running her Rahu Dasha, she attracted Bob Dylan. They get in a relationship. He gets fame. They start having this like interesting tryst of sorts, and it's creative, and he's off and he's becoming famous. And then it helps her career while she's in the Rahu Dasha, 7th house lord, disposited by the 10th house. It's too accurate. Okay, so that's the nodal axis in the first 7th axis. It gives them that Ketu energy. She's Ketu, okay? She's spiritual, interested in enlightenment, interested in consciousness, kind of strange in her identity. She doesn't always understand herself, right? She got diagnosed with a disorder where she changes her personality and sort of shifts. Ketu in the first house, Rahu in the 7th, then she attracts a partner who is on drugs, alcohol, famous, successful. 7th house lord goes into the 10th house, and they, kind of help each other's career in a sense as well too. And it's a creative career, right? Because Venus sits there. Best believe it. Okay. So that's the energy of the nodal axis, right? And just like analyzing the nodes could give this like whole hour-long reading, right? Like that could be so much of her life story. Okay, so Pisces Lagna, Pisces Ascendant means that her first house is ruled by Jupiter, right? So we get Ketu in the first house. That's already this like spiritual sort of influence. And then we hop over to Jupiter, which happens to sit in the 2nd house. So in Vedic astrology, the 2nd house is the voice, it's the speech, it's the expression. She's a singer, right? First house lord is in the 2nd house of the voice and the speech. What would be more literal than a singer using their voice their whole life? Like, it doesn't really get much more literal than that. So first house lord is Jupiter. It's here in the 2nd house of Aries. It's next to Saturn, about a 2-degree orb of a conjunction, which is a pretty tight degree orb of conjunction. So we would intuit first house lord is in the 2nd. Good for financial gains, good for financial security. you know, she's had like millions, of course, in her lifetime. But also the second house is the voice and speech and expression. So her whole career and her whole life is not only about being a singer and a songstress and a lyricist, which would be that second house of the voice. It's also about activism, okay? So if someone is going to be an activist and they're going to speak on what they believe in, what are they going to be using all the time? They're going to be using their voice. Second house of the voice. This is one of those charts where I want to plaster it up on a billboard and be like, do you guys see how accurate Vedic astrology is? Because come on. Okay, first house lord is in the second house. Jupiter's there. Jupiter's expanding the voice. Really powerful for the voice, speech, expression, singing, lyricism, activism. Now, this is going to be one of those really minute details of astrology that, you know, takes a while to get there. Okay, so I want to show you guys something. This is one of those things that I would have never been able to analyze in like my early years of astrology, but let's get into this. Okay, so first house lord is Jupiter, sits right next to Saturn. Okay, so Saturn's at 14 degrees, Jupiter is 12 degrees. So the ascendant is now getting some Saturnian energy to it, okay? Why? Because Saturn is sitting right next to the first house lord, Jupiter. Okay, so now we get this like Saturnian sort of influence into the ascendant. Okay, again, this is one of those minute aspects of Vedic astrology that took me years to even start to understand how complex and how detailed we can get with analysis. Okay, so Saturn is right next to the first house lord. So she's very Jupiterian, right? She's a teacher, she's wise, she's trying to spread, you know, this bigger message, right? That's Jupiter. It's philosophical, it's spiritual. There's a lot of wisdom, right? I see Jupiter as the karaka or the indication of wisdom, spiritual wisdom, right? Then it's right next to Saturn. So Saturn is actually discipline, Saturn is structure, Saturn is order, Saturn is duty, Saturn is that more righteous energy of like, no, I want to do this the right way. People with a strong Saturn energy, they like to be perceived in a way where they feel like their values and their morals and their principles are really aligning with the person that they are. So if someone has like a strong Saturn energy, you know, right next to their first house lord planet, someone wants to come across in a way that's righteous, that is duty oriented, right? Let's say someone has like Rahu on the ascendant. They're more so interested in like, I want to stand out. I want to be seen. I want to be successful. I want to be, you know, that's more of that Rahu. Saturn next to the first house lord is like, I want to be disciplined. I want to be seen in a way where I'm moralistic. So Joan was said to be so rigid at times in the way that she was because she really wanted to be perceived in the right way, right? She wanted people to really get her message clearly. She wanted to be very much this like righteous sort of person and, you know, social justice, right? And that would be Jupiter with Saturn, right? It's kind of like bringing that Saturnian discipline, that Saturnian structure, that Saturnian, you know, righteousness right next to Jupiter, which Jupiter is also righteousness and spirituality, and I want to be seen in this way. So this is a conjunction that is giving this sense of her being very justice-seeking, very duty-oriented. She wants to do the right thing, I'll tell you that much, with the first house lord right next to Saturn, and then Jupiter's there. Okay, so were there some issues in her early childhood experience with Saturn in the second? Best believe it. You know, it's still Saturn in the second house of early childhood, but she takes that and uses it in her creativity and her writing and her expression and her, you know, songwriting and her singing, right? So all of that is very, very interesting. Also, it's said that a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is seen as a point of manifestation in the chart. Because if we think about Jupiter, Jupiter is expansive, Jupiter is benefic, but if someone has too much Jupiter influence in their charts, if someone has too much Jupiter energy in their chart, they love the fun, they love the philosophy so much that they don't always have the discipline and the structure that it takes to really ground that into the tangible world, right? So then when we get Saturn next to Jupiter, Saturn is bringing that like discipline, that structure, that order that is needed to sort of refine the energy of Jupiter, right? So we get Jupiter's expanding, Saturn's refining. So it can be a really powerful point of the chart, actually, when someone has a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, because it's bringing that discipline that's needed to like refine that Jupiterian expansive sort of energy. So then we get a point of manifestation in the second house of the voice, speech, money. There you go. Okay. Now, let's move over to the moon in the third house. This is really powerful. So, the houses that we are looking to for the arts is always going to be the third house, okay, and the fifth house. Third house, fifth house. Now, if we get connections between the two creative houses, if we get the fifth house lord in the third house lord in the fifth house, then we really get creativity in the charts, because that is connecting the two most creative houses in astrology, okay? So we'll get to that in a little bit, but two houses of creativity. Just remember this, drill this into your mind. The two creative houses are the third house and the fifth house. Third house is performing. Third house is energy. Third house is writing. You know, third house is very performative in its energy. Fifth house is creative as well, too. It can be publishing. The fifth house is the house of publishing. It's the arts. It's purva punya. It's good past life karma. So if someone has a good fifth house, they've accumulated a lot of good past life karma as well, too. Okay, so these are the two creative houses. Now, if we want someone to be, successful at the arts, we want to see a strong third house planet or a strong fifth house planet, meaning like a planet in its own sign, a planet exalted, a strong planet in one of those houses. Okay, so third house of Taurus, we get the moon in Taurus in the Rohini nakshatra. Now, it's said in Vedic astrology that the moon does best in Rohini. That's like the nakshatra that the moon loves to be in. If you're going to do like a daily prashna or a daily chart, you want the moon to be in the Rohini nakshatra, best believe it. So we get the moon exalted in Taurus in the third house of the arts. Yes, we do. And it's also in Rohini, which is one of the best nakshatras for the moon. Okay, so this is powerful. This is really, really powerful. So again, if there's one thing to take away from analyzing Vedic astrological charts, look to where planets are exalted, look to where planets are in their own sign, and look to that house and what is that house all about, because someone is going to then have strength in that house. So now we get strength in performing, we get strength in the arts, and that's her whole life. That's her whole entire life, is performing in the arts. That's moon exalted in Taurus in the best nakshatra that the moon loves to be in, Rohini. Okay? Now, to even add more fuel to the fire, strength to this moon in the third house of the arts, let's look to the opposition of what's in the ninth house. Okay? So, moon is in the third, powerful moon, really, really great. And then we see the opposite, which is going to be Mars, which loves to be in Scorpio in the ninth house. So now we have a Chandra Mangal yoga. Okay, so now we have moon opposite Mars. So when the moon comes together with Mars in a conjunction or an opposition, then we get what's known as a Chandra Mangal yoga, or a business success producing yoga in Vedic astrology. Okay. I talk about this a lot, but there are so many yogas in Vedic astrology, which, by the way, yoga doesn't mean the arts of moving the body. No, yoga just means union, okay? So yoga in Vedic astrology is a union of planets, all right? So there's many yogas. There's the Dana yogas, the wealth-producing yogas. There's so many yogas that I personally only use the ones that I have found to work time and time and time and time and time again. Okay? Because I'm a practicing Vedic astrologer. I'm not like off in the ethers, right? Like I have to be accurate when I talk about yogas. So one of the yogas that I find to be very, very accurate is the Chandramangal yoga. When moon is conjunct or opposite Mars, someone is drawn to working for themselves, having a business, and having success in that business, especially if it connects to the houses that the Chandramangal yoga activates, okay? So now we get business success. Now we get success working for herself. She's worked for herself her whole life, right? She's an artist. She's, we might not think of her as like an entrepreneur, right? I feel like a lot of times we don't think of artists as entrepreneurs, but like they are because they've worked for themselves, right? So she's also an entrepreneur. She's, worked for herself. She has her own brand, her own business, Chandramangal yoga. And this is very, very interesting because the moon is the public, the moon is the masses. It's in the third house of the arts. The moon loves to be in Taurus. And then it's opposites, the ninth house, which is, philosophy, religion, our belief system. And then Mars is in Scorpio, so it's a strong Mars, which Mars connects to activism, okay? Mars connects to this warrior sort of energy that will fight for what they believe in. And it's in the ninth house of higher belief, okay? So it's like too accurate that it's just like, it's almost funny at this point. But Chandramangal yoga, success between the third house and the ninth house. Okay, success between the arts with the public, and then the ninth house, activism and higher belief. That's her whole life story. That's her whole entire life story. Activism and creativity that she is putting into her art and her performing. Like, come on. It's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Okay. Chandramangal yoga, strength of the moon, strength of the Mars, business success, third house of the arts and performing, ninth house of higher belief, morals, principles. Mars is their activism. And that's it. That is it. Okay. So also, you'll find with moon opposite Mars, I have this aspect in my chart, so I know it very well. When someone has moon opposite Mars, moon is the emotional reactions, and then Mars is like passion, energy. So the moon-Mars aspect, conjunction or opposition, will give people this very fiery, feisty energy when they feel like activated by something, right? Where it's very quick, it's very impulsive, it's very like, I feel this in the moment, and it's coming out in a Mars-like way. Right? It's not so refined emotionally. It's very impulsive and energized in the reaction. So a lot of those who have very strong beliefs in this lifetime will have a moon conjunct or opposite Mars because the emotions get very like riled up by the Mars energy. It's like, I believe in this. I think this is true. This is how I feel. It's coming out. Like when I was younger, I have the Chandramangal yoga. People always told me to be a lawyer. Like everyone was like, you're going to be a lawyer. Because I would get so like riled up and I would like make lists of like, no, this is my point. And like, I just feel like it's so true. So also a lot of that like activism and that feeling of like really believing strongly in what you believe in can be seen with a moon-Mars aspect. Okay. And if we're going to look to the chart of an activist, we're going to see a strong Mars. Like, let's be so for real. Like, Mars is either going to be in Scorpio or Aries if someone is going to be professionally an activist, because that's the energy of Mars, right? Mars is activism. Mars is fighting for what someone believes in. When someone has a strong Mars, they feel very strongly about what they feel strongly about, and they can be very, activated to express it, because that's Mars, best believe it. So she has a strong Mars, strong moon, opposite each other, Chandramangal yoga, third house of creativity, third house of performing, third house of the arts, ninth house of higher belief, morals, principles, philosophical, spiritual wisdom. And that's it right there. So Mars, because it is strong in the ninth house, she did have some issues, maybe some conflict with traditional religion at some point, okay? Because Mars is that energy that like is fighting and it's drive, but it also can cause some like tension or friction as well too with whatever house it goes into. So it's in the ninth house of religion, right? And when I looked into this, I researched this earlier. I was like, Joan Baez, religious upbringing, issues with religion, question mark. It says Joan Baez was raised in a family that converted to Quakerism during her early childhood. She identified with this tradition, particularly its emphasis on social justice. I mean, that's Mars, strong in the ninth house of... Anyways, and while her parents were Quakers, she stated that she doesn't identify with this faith as an adult. Okay. So that's some issues, some Mars energy with traditional religion, but also it energizes it. So she also had a lot of that theme active in her life, right? Both things are true. All right, really powerful. Really, really, really powerful. Now, let's move over to, this is what I was going to get to. So if we get connections between the third house and the fifth house, two houses of the arts, then we're really getting an artistic chart. So we get moon in the third. That's already beautiful, benefic, exalted, third house of the arts. Love it. Beautiful, stunning, great. Now let's move over to the fifth house. Fifth house is the second house of the arts. Fifth house is Cancer. Cancer gets ruled by the moon. So now the fifth house lord is in the third house. Now we're getting connections between the two most creative houses in the charts. Fifth house lord in the third house. Really, really powerful. Really, really creative. Really powerful. Okay. Now, let's move over to this powerful 10th house now. Okay. So, 10th house of Sagittarius. Venus, Mercury, the Sun, 3 planetary energies in the 10th house. So that's a lot of energy active in someone's career. Venus is a benefic, Mercury is a benefic, Sun is a mild malefic, okay? Here's the thing about the Sun. Ancient texts in Vedic astrology will say the Sun's a malefic, it's going to destroy whatever house is there. It's not true because the Sun is just a lot of energy. It's a mild malefic in the sense that if the Sun hits a house and then all these other malefics also hit that house, Saturn, Ketu, Mars, and then the Sun hits that house, then we're getting that more malefic influence. If we get 2 benefics and then the Sun just gets added on to the benefic influence, we're actually just getting more energy active to that house. That's what I have found. That's what my Vedic astrology teacher taught us. That's what I have found to be very, very true in chart analysis, because the ancient texts will say, like, it's burnt out, it's destroyed. It's not true. It's not true. So Venus is a karaka for the arts. It's in the 10th house of the career. Doesn't get much more literal than that. Creative career. Mercury is sitting there. Mercury is writing. Mercury is communication. What was she? A performer and a writer and an artist. Venus, Mercury in the 10th house. Now we get the Sun. The Sun is going to be that ability to be a leader. Sun is very feisty. Sun is very passionate, right? The Sun is that really strong energy for someone to have pretty strong, beliefs and feelings about things. So is Mars, so is the Sun. So then we get that Sun influence, which means that she has to work for herself in this lifetime. I get a lot of clients with Sun in the 10th house, and I always tell them, whew, do you have issues when you work for other people? And they go, yes. What is that? And I go, oh, that's Sun in the 10th house. Because when someone has Sun in the 10th house, they're kind of a natural leader. They like to work for themselves. They like to do their own thing in this lifetime. So when they try to work for other people, this sort of tension, friction aspect can really exist. So that's Sun in the 10th house, working for oneself. Mercury is writing, expression, communication, teaching. Venus is the arts. That's her whole career. That is it right there. Mercury is not in its best placement because it's opposite Gemini, where Mercury likes to be in Gemini, so it's opposite the sign that it wants to be in. which might be a problem if it was hit by more malefics, but because it's right near the sun and Venus, it more so, we can take minor details of that, where maybe she had some issues at times with her mother. They might have had, some disagreements at different points. Also, she might have some communication issues in her personal life with that Mercury in Sagittarius, opposite Gemini. But because we get Venus, the great benefic, and then we get the sun, which likes to be in the 10th house for working for oneself, we're not going to put too much emphasis on that. Okay? Now, this is where things get even more wild. 10th house of Sagittarius gets ruled by Jupiter. So her 10th house lord, Jupiter, in the second of the voice. Creative career, writing, teaching. She's also kind of a teacher as well too, right? She's teaching people about these different beliefs, and she's, trying to bring this like insight and wisdom into her career. And now we get 10th house lord in the second of the voice, singing. She's a singer. 10th house lord in the second house. Okay. Also, the 10th house lord being near Saturn would show that her career also has that like Saturnian influence, which is, wanting to have this righteous sort of career as well too. All right. Now, let's hop over to her 11th house, Capricorn, because this is also interesting. The 11th house being Capricorn, it means it gets ruled by Saturn. So the 11th house lord is now in the second house, okay? So the 11th house is the house of great gains, financial gains, connects to the second house of money and finances and the voice. So this is actually pretty wealth producing when we get the 11th lord in the second, or the second lord in the 11th. It's going to give someone some pretty strong ability for wealth as well. And that 11th house lord in the second means gains from the voice, gains from expression, gains from singing. 11th house lord in the second. Right? Now, here's another really minute detail of Vedic analysis that, again, I would have missed in my first 2 years of Vedic astrology. I would have never seen this. I would have never seen this. But we have Jupiter in Aries. Okay? Now, Jupiter creates special aspects, houses that are 5 houses, 9 houses over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, Jupiter is now aspecting the 10th house of Sagittarius, okay? Jupiter is naturally in Pisces or Sagittarius. So now Jupiter is aspecting its own sign in the 10th house of career. So we already get 2 benefics in the 10th house, really powerful for the career. Then we also get Jupiter aspecting its own sign in the 10th house, which is going to bring more benefic influence, expands the career, but also bring that Jupiterian influence into the career, which is teaching, which is being that more philosophical sort of energy, right? So there's also that spiritual philosophical undertone connected now to the career, because it's aspecting its own sign of Sagittarius. Really, really powerful. That's a lot of benefic influence in the 10th house for someone to have a big, larger than life career. Okay? Now, Rahu, this is really, again, a very minute, very, very minute detail of like astrology analysis that takes a while to get to, but Rahu's in Virgo in the 7th, okay? So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Rahu is 12 degrees. The moon is 10 degrees. Now we're getting this like Rahu moon aspect, which acts like a conjunction, right? Because they're also very tight in degree orb. So what have I said about Rahu energy, especially Rahu on the moon? Rahu on the moon creates obsessions, phobias, fears, obsessive thinking, crazy sort of thoughts, but also a lot of creativity when Rahu aspects the moon. So I was kind of surprised by that, because I thought like Joan was kind of, she seemed very calm and cool and collected in her vibe. And I was like, but she has Rahu in a 2-degree orb of conjunction on her moon. What is that all about, right? So this is where we go into our research. Joan Baez, obsessive thoughts. This honestly shocked me. I was like, there's no way. So Joan Baez has spoken about her connection to fears, phobias, panic attacks, obsessive thoughts. Guys, it's too much. It's too accurate. Like the fact that I've said multiple times when someone has Rahu on the moon, they have obsessive thoughts, and that in her documentary she says, I have obsessive thoughts. It's too much. It's too much. So Joan Baez has spoken about her struggle with anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive thoughts. She describes the issues starting early in life, impacting her throughout her career. She attributes some of her mental health issues to childhood trauma. Oh, okay. Including potential abuse by her father. Okay. That's the Mars in the 9th house. I was curious about that. So even though Mars is strong in the 9th house, Mars can be violence and abuse. It's in the 9th house of the father. So it's actually a strong Mars in the 9th house of the father. So it says that there was some, sort of like ponderings about childhood abuse from the father. Okay. Obviously, those are things that I don't enjoy bringing up in chart analysis, especially if I'm working with clients one-on-one, but when there is a strong Mars and it's in the 9th house, it can show abuse or sexual abuse from the father, because the 9th house is the house of father. So that is that. Okay. So Rahu on the moon, it's giving a lot of that, obsessive, sort of compulsive energy onto the moon, which is the mind and the mental energy. So you'll find a lot of people with Rahu moon, struggle with anxiety, struggle with overthinking. The mind is very Rahu-like, right? If we think about Rahu is too much, so much energy. Oh my God, Rahu's extreme, right? So the mind becomes very Rahu-like when someone has a Rahu moon aspect, obsessive, compulsive, phobias, fears, addictions, obsessive thoughts, anxiety, panic attacks. That's Rahu on the moon. Okay. All right. Yeah, that aspect about potential history of abuse by the father that would definitely be the Mars in the 9th house of the father. Oh, it's heavy, but okay. And then activism, but then it also brings that ability for activism, because Mars is going to be that righteousness, fighting for what one believes, and it's in the 9th house of principles and morals and higher belief. So unfortunately, when we get a strong planet, we get both the good and the bad of that planet. It just means the energy is stronger. So it means that Mars would be stronger in the 9th house for fighting, friction, potential issues with the father as well too. All right, so she also talks a lot about therapy. She initially put it off due to fear. Rahu on the moon creates all these crazy what ifs and fears, and oh my God, I've spoken about this 2 of my videos before. Rahu on the moon creates obsessive thinking, where someone is always thinking the craziest, worst case scenario is going to happen. I've seen it in all of my clients who have a Rahu moon aspect, and I always talk to them about it because it gives them so much clarity and actually really helps them understand that aspect of themselves. Because Rahu on the moon is what if this happens? Oh my God, what if this happens? It's very like that. So she talked about that in her documentary. All right, that's the obsessive thoughts of Rahu on the moon. And also, how I brought up earlier that her Mercury is in Sagittarius, opposite Gemini. Mercury is the mind, the mental energy, and it is also the nervous system. Mercury is the nervous system. So because Mercury is in Sagittarius, opposite of Gemini, she also has issues with anxiety, nerves, and her nervous system, quite literally. Okay? So that's the minute details of analysis when Mercury is outside of the sign it wants to be in. Okay, now there's some issues with Mercury. The nervous system, anxiety, all of that. All right, so let us look as well too, because this is also very interesting, D9. So in her D9 Navamsha, which is another chart that I use to analyze just to get like further confirmation. I don't overly analyze. I'm not sitting there looking at the D9 chart for hours like I do with the D1, just because it's more so just added on. Okay, let's get further confirmation from the D9. But in the D9 Navamsha, her 10th house Lord is in the 3rd house of the arts. Okay. So the 10th house gets ruled by the 3rd house of the arts in the D9, and then it's ruled by the 2nd house of the voice in the D1. So that's giving us like further confirmation. And then the 3rd house Lord is in the 10th house in the D1 as well too. So that's a creative career as well too. And then of course Venus in the 10th is the classic creative career, because the Karaka for the arts is in the house of the career. It's pretty simplistic with that one, right? But it doesn't mean, by the way, it doesn't mean that every single chart where Venus in the 10th house is going to be an artist. No, no, no. We have to go into much more in-depth analysis. But if we already get exalted moon in the 3rd of the arts, 1st house Lord in the 2nd of the voice, 5th house Lord in the 3rd of the arts, Venus in the 10th of the arts, and then the D9, 10th house Lord in the 3rd house of the arts. It's like, okay, we can make a solid prediction that this is an artist, right? All right, and this is interesting as well too. You know, Joan Baez has a lot of struggles with her past relationships. In the documentary, she talked a lot about Bob Dylan, and, you know, he was going off and being very Rahu-like, but also she has Mars 7th from the moon. So something that's really, really important in 7th house relationship analysis is wherever the moon goes, you really want to check what planets go 7th from Chandra Lagna. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We get Mars 7th from the moon. Okay. So now we're getting some Mars influence into the relationships. And this is like, again, it's one of those things where it's too eerily accurate sometimes, but Mars 7th from the moon could give a partner who's connected to military, law, justice, and also Mars would be the energy of like, you know, friction in the relationship. Now, that's 7th from the moon, right? 7 houses from the, so this is like the relationship house, right? So let's say Joan Baez, first husband. I believe he quite literally was connected to like war and then went to jail. So it's just like, it's crazy. Okay, so on July 16th, 1969, her ex-husband was taken by federal marshals to prison. I mean, it's just like, that is literally Mars 7th from the moon. Prison, friction. I think he was also involved with like activism. Yeah, okay. Let's do some research here. Okay. So he was a resistor from the Vietnam anti-war era. He inspired generations. Okay, so that's that activism. That's Mars, 7th from the moon. And there it is. But also it does cause issues as well when someone has Mars, 7th from the moon. It does give someone who can be like an activist. That's very Mars-like. Also, he was taken off to jail. Mars, 7th from the moon. And then Rahu in the 7th house is also causing a lot of these like karmic issues in the relationship house as well too. So this is not an easy chart for marriage, because we get Mars 7th from the moon, Rahu in the 7th house. It's really not easy, right? Because those are two malefic influences. Her 7th house Lord is in her 11th, and her D9 of Vamsha, and Jupiter is in the 11th. Okay. It's a little bit better in the D9. But it's not an easy chart for the relationship marriage sector. But anywho's, so that was in-depth Vedic chart analysis into Joan Baez's Vedic astrological charts. when we get that high level of accuracy for birth time, it's my favorite thing. I was so excited to do her chart, and she was really a powerhouse of a person, right? And we get that from that strong Mars influence. Mars is going to be drive and energy and activism. You're going to see a strong Mars if someone is an activist, best believe it. That's also that really strong energy in the 10th house. She has a powerful career, Shanjamangal yoga, success producing, Jupiter with Saturn, a lot of power in that second house. Best believe it. Rahu in the 7th, famous partners who go off and do drugs. Bob Dylan. Ketu in the 1st gives her this kind of interesting connection to fame and the public, and there's kind of this introspective, shy quality that she feels deep down. She feels very different than people around her, especially in her upbringing. She also kind of gets an isolated moon. I mean, she gets Mars influence onto it, but a little bit of an isolated moon as well, too, which means that there was some sense of not really fitting in her early upbringing as well, too. All right, so that is her whole life story. There it is. Pretty wild, right? That you can give someone their entire life story in about an hour to an hour and a half through Vedic astrology. I always remember early on in my days of Vedic astrology, I had this client who wanted me to come see her in person. And I don't usually do too much in person just because I have a lot of charts to analyze and I get distracted when I'm like around people. I'm like, no, I have to pull up this chart and now I'm looking at this chart. And it's kind of a lot when someone is there. But for whatever reason, I felt called to go see this client in person. And so I went and I met her, and she was so sweet, and she, wanted me to marry her son, and which is a whole different story. But, and she was great. And I remember at the end of the session, she was like, I'll never forget what she said. She said, if someone wrote my life story, you just told it to me through Vedic astrology. And that was one of those moments where, like, it gave me chills and it made me feel like this is my dharma, this is my purpose, this is what I'm meant to do. But also, it's not about me, it's about the system of Vedic astrology, where I had come from Western astrology at that time. And, Vedic astrology was scary. It was really, really scary. I don't always talk about this so much, but when I was younger, I bought this book, and it was a Vedic astrology book. So I grew up next door to a professional Vedic astrologer. Yes, I did. Talk about fate. And she used to come over and she'd be like, you're a Virgo. You don't seem like a Libra. I'd be like, okay. No, I'm kidding. But, and so upon a weird series of events, I'm like, okay, Vedic astrology, it's all around me. It's in the ethers. People are talking about it. People are asking me about it. And so I bought this Vedic astrology book, and it was so complex that I actually got scared. Like, I got scared, and I was like, I will never be able to learn this. And I threw it onto my bed, and I was like, I'm never going to learn Vedic astrology in this lifetime. It is too complex. I said that to myself. I was like, I'm never going to learn it. Threw it on my bed, gave up on it. And it's really this profound sort of like full circle experience to now be at a place where I can read Vedic astrology charts and it all makes sense and it all clicks. So this is obviously going off on a different sort of tangent. Yes, I'm a Virgo with a Gemini rising. I'm all ruled by Mercury. So I tend to go on tangents, but it's really wild to me that, like, coming from the system of Western astrology, and how Vedic astrology was pretty forced into my path, I just think it's the most beautiful system of astrology. It gives me chills. It gives me this feeling that I really can't explain, other than I actually feel like Vedic astrology is the true source of the divine. Like, I feel it when I'm doing charts. It feels like that divinity is, like, coming through Vedic astrology, which I never once felt in Western astrology, ever. Never felt it. So it's really, really powerful. And you know, this is Joan's whole life story. It really, really is. And we can sum it up in an hour. And to me, that's like the most profound thing. And I always come back to so much gratitude for being able to learn Vedic astrology in this lifetime and having had some of the most amazing teachers. It's been like the biggest blessing. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that little tidbit in because I always remember I was really nervous at the start of my Vedic astrology practice because it's so complex. And I would study charts before I'd go to see my clients, and I would study them over and over again. And what is this going to mean? And blah, blah, you know. And I just always remember that one client was like, if someone told me my life story, you just said it in 1 hour. And I was like, there it is. There it is. All right, which is not to say, by the way, that I'm anywhere near like masterful at Vedic astrology. I have so many more years of study, and I'll probably study Vedic astrology my whole life, and I'll probably look back at this moment and be like, oh my God, I missed so many things in the chart analysis, right? Because Vedic astrology is so insanely complex. But that's just to show that like if you really dedicate yourself to something, you can learn anything. You can acquire any knowledge. You just have to be dedicated when it comes to Vedic astrology study. All right, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this chart analysis. As always, I'm open for personal sessions where I do this with your chart, right? So I basically pull up a client's chart, record a video, and go into this exact in-depth analysis. And it's one of my favorite videos or content sessions to do because then you guys also get a sense of how I'm analyzing astrology through a visual sort of perspective. And it's really, really cool. And it's one of my favorite sessions to actually do. All right, so I hope you guys have such a beautiful, blessed day. Let me know what you learned from this, what your takeaway was. Is there anything else that you guys pick up in the chart? I also love comments. Like, my favorite thing is a lot of you guys know so much about Vedic astrology, and so I'll get comments where someone will say something and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're so right, I didn't even see that in the chart. And I'm like, whoa. So yeah, I always love hearing from you guys and your insights as well too. All right, I'm sending all the best vibes, all the love, and we will talk soon. Bye guys.